Well, I guess there's no doubt in my mind that you guys wanted to see this. So I guess we're gonna go more in depth with this video. So before I start this video, I want to make it clear, I'm not doing this for like views or clicks and anything like that. This was actually a video that I had planned to make, but I didn't know if people would actually care enough about it. So I planned on originally posting, you know, part 1 for just the head build and, you know, going more in depth with it. I planned originally on doing an Instagram poll once I had posted that 20-second snippet if people would have wanted to see, you know, the process of me just going more in depth with it. By the way, if you want to see more pictures of Ozzie in the works and whatnot, I'd highly recommend checking out my Instagram. And for those of you who are new here, because I know I got a lot of subscribers, I'm not going to beat around the bush and say like, oh, I'm some happy-go-lucky person. This page is definitely filled with a lot of very dark, edgy, vulgar language, humor. You can look at my Instagram or, you know, watch my other videos to kind of get a feel for it. But I'm not going to beat around the bush in that and act like everyone knows me here. So if you are a newcomer, I hope you do choose to stick around. But if not, understandable. As Tex said, enough horse shit. Let's get into the video of why you all came here. You all came to see this son of a bitch. Look, he looks so derpy. I know the eyes are small. I'm actually gonna go much more in depth with that later because there's actually kind of a fun fact and story behind that. So without further ado, let's get into the build process. Here's some footage of me at the beginning of April at Joann Fabrics getting eyes and felt for the material I need. I used foam balls and those DIY transparent Christmas ornaments to make the moving eyelids, and then I just kind of went over them and put felt on them and cut them so that they can actually move around the eye. The rod you see in the middle is a coat hanger, and it's also circled around half of the eye so it can connect. After the eyes were done, I made this little stand out of wood and coat hangers to support the eyes, and I attached it onto a foam base plate. Originally this was temporary, but then it became a permanent feature on the model. After I made the eye mechanism, I started trying to pattern out the beak. Now this took a lot of thinking for me to do, but after I got done with it, I think it turned out really nice, and it honestly is one of the best looking parts of the model. After I was done with this, I started trying to make little test models of the gear train for the eye mechanism. Here's the early Type 1 version. After I got the gear train up and working, this is when I started to mechanize the eyes. Now the thing that I used to get the motor to be Bluetooth compatible is I used this Wowie Rev car that is able to connect to phones. Now my little brother just had 2 spare lying around, so I took one, and of course I think you know what happened then. Afterwards, I then made a lower jaw and started test fitting and moving everything just to see how it would all kind of look when everything's put into fruition. And after many sleepless nights of trial and error, it happened. Everything had worked flawlessly with this, and I was insanely happy with it. Now later on I would go to revise the gear train that I used for it, but after this I considered this a victory, and I took a much needed hiatus from working on Ozzie. After I got back into the swing of things, I made this rough sketch of what I wanted Ozzie to look like, and this is kind of where I started to base things off of from this point forward. After this, I made a rough outline out of cardboard just to kind of get that head shape down, but then it was at this point when I realized the fact that that gear train was way too fucking tall. After this point, I went into designer mode, and I made a far more compact and much more efficient gear train system. After several days of experimenting with everything, the gear train was up and running, and honestly I'm glad that I don't have to see that god-awful tower anymore. At this point, the eye mechanics worked flawlessly, and they were pretty much set in stone at this point. This is the point where I started to design the endoskeleton so I could have just a general shape and get a feel for it. This endoskeleton is comprised of cardboard, foam, and coat hangers. Yes, I went through a lot of coat hangers making this project. At this point, the shape of the head took form, and then this was just a matter of covering up all the coat hangers so that I could overlay felt on it. Following the same thing that I did for my Spring Bonnie head, I did the same thing for Ozzie, and I wrapped it up with tape. This gave Ozzie's head shape, but unfortunately, with the way that the eye mechanism sits, I was unable to make the front part of his face a much more rounded. I really did want to change this up, but because of the way that the cardboard sat, the eye mechanism was, and the endoskeleton as a whole, I couldn't really do much about it. Now at this point, I had been severely contemplating if I was going to give Ozzie a moving mouth. Originally, I was all for it, but then after the struggles I had with the moving eye mechanism, I was really questioning the fact if I want to go through that stress again. But I ended up caving in and doing so. And actually, it turned out a lot easier than I thought this time around, because all I did was took the gear train system from the eye mechanism and just made one that's on its side. Though this one isn't remote control, it's just fixated to a normal mechanism because, well, that'd just be too much to add on to, and I did not have the patience. Next came the overlay part, where I just took felt, overlaid it on the parts, cut out the shapes, and I hot glued it in place. It really didn't take too long. It took about a day and a half or so. Far easier than that goddamn Spring Bonnie project, but still, I'm actually really happy with how the back part of the head turned out. Once again, as I said earlier, I do wish the face had more depth to it, but this still isn't a finished project, so who knows, I might come up with something along the lines. Last thing I did was add 3 fucking nail clips to his head, and boom, you got yourself an ostrich. And there you go, folks. That's pretty much the black and white of how I made Ozzie the Ostrich. Now this guy, as I said, he's far from done. There's still a lot of things I want to do. Mainly do something with the eyes, because as I said earlier, the eyes are very tiny. I don't know how the hell they got to be that small, seeing as the whole build basically revolved around the eyes. But here's some rough photoshops that I did of how I'm going to make it look, or want it to look, so you can judge it off of this. But as I said earlier, things like the face being flat and such, it's just not something I could do, because the way that the head is patterned, and the way that the eye mechanism sits in the front, it would just be much harder to get that shape for it to sit comfortably. But the clip I'm about to show you is one I took during the build process, and I'd say it sums up my intentions behind Ozzie pretty well. It might not be as elaborate as the other one, but I made you with spirit, and that's what matters, you beautiful blinking bird you. This wasn't meant to be something that could be on par with the original movie. It was something that was put simply made by someone who genuinely loves this character and the other ones. Could I have done better? Most definitely. But am I still happy with it? Also most definitely. So that's the build process as of now. Currently it's just the head that's done, which is definitely the most elaborate and complicated part. I am going to have part 2 and part 3. Part 2 is going to be on the torso and neck, and then part 3 is going to be on the legs, and just probably much more the endoskeleton build. That's going to be kind of integrated between the two, because the hardest part is definitely going to be, now that the head is done, how am I going to support the head, because this thing is actually it's heavy as hell. So if you have subscribed for Ozzie, don't feel gypped on it, because I'm going to be doing more videos detailing Ozzie, and of course I still have other projects I'm going to do. Some comments were asking me, am I going to do the entire, Willy's Wonderland gang? The answer is, as of now, no. There are going to be, however, 2 other characters I'm going to build, and that would be Ozzie the Alligator, because he's one, I think his design is really, it's fun. I like crocodiles and alligators. And Willy the Weasel, who has one of my favorite designs along with Ozzie. So those 2 will be coming next. You'll definitely see a lot more of this stuff on my Instagram. So if you do have one and you want to see much more in-depth videos of it and whatnot, highly recommend checking that out. So overall, there are probably going to be a few things here and there that I'm going to change. For example, as I mentioned, the eyes, I don't know exactly how the eyes turned out to be the worst part of it, because the entire build revolved around the eyes. That was the first thing that I built, and everything just kind of built upon that. So I'm not even like exaggerating this. I genuinely don't know. I don't know how that turned out to be the worst feature, but it is kind of funny. I don't know if I'm gonna ever go in and manually change the eyes out to be bigger, because I do think that with bigger eyes he looks a lot better, but at the same time that would bring apart a lot of complications of trying to get in there, fix things around, change it, swapping out the eyes. I don't know, who knows. But if I ever do decide to do that, you'll definitely see updates on that. Of course, there are going to be some things here and there I want to change about, so that's all I got to say for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the flip side.